All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our week number 6 live session for Farm to Tables. Good to see everybody. Hope everybody's surviving the summer, doing well. I know it can be challenging. It's certainly super hot here in South Carolina. We had this major storm last night with wind that was crazy and scary. And so it's nice today. So the internet connection should be all right. But anyway, I know that can start happening a lot around the country. So I hope everybody's staying safe, enjoying summer, not getting too hot, and cooking some good food. We have our break coming up next week. We have our live session today, obviously, and a little bit later we have our second one. But then we're gonna have class until Tuesday, just like always. So your week 6 assignment will be due 11:59 p.m. Central on Tuesday, just as always. But then we basically think about it. We're just gonna hit pause on the class page. All right, we're just gonna pause this until we get back a week later, and we're going to have kick it back off on Wednesday. So that to say, the late period for your week 6 assignment is actually a very long late period for that. Okay, so I would encourage you to knock it out because you don't want to be doing things over the break. If we have any makeup arrangements already that we've spoken about, and I mean like between you and I in here and also watching the archive, if we've been discussing makeup work, all of that stuff needs to be taken care of as well for weeks 1 through 6. Because that will permanently close once we're back from break. So just shoot me a message and let me know if there's things like that that we've chatted about already. Anyway, but that's happening. That's coming up. But it's basically business as usual as long as we're looking at, the Tuesday deadline for the assignment, and we all get a little break, and then we kick it off in week 7 when we get back. And week 7 is really cool. It's a nice week to get back into things, kind of get back in the groove, because it's a pretty straightforward, easy week. We're doing a quick bread and a puree soup. It's pretty easy. So you might want to scope some of that out. I'll definitely make that material available for y'all to peruse over the break. And that's coming up. So yeah, let's see. First of all, before we get started, I will show a little highlight reel from last week. With the disclaimer again that I'll always say it, that just because if your work is not on the little slideshow, please don't take it personally. It means nothing as far as the quality of your work. It is just a cross section of me quickly going through some assignments and grabbing some pictures. So that to say, any questions about our week 5 assignment? I know it was tricky. It was a brand new technique for a lot of us. It's definitely an old school technique. You don't really see it out even when you're out to eat. You won't often see it on menus. But it does exist. Any questions, comments? How did everybody feel about week 5?
That was actually pretty cool.
Cool, right? Yeah, it's nice to kind of get go back to the old school sometimes. You
To
guys can.
me, to me, it was one of the best things that I made in class. Yeah, like throughout my whole course, like it was
Yeah.
real flavorful, good. Like it was
What
real
about
good.
it? What about it made it one of the best, Romor?
Mm.
What'd you like about it?
I like I liked it the flavor. I like the flavors that I got from it, like the flavor wheel. I like the
Finished result.
sourness from the lemon. I like the sweet from the onion, and I like it the saltiness from the salt. And then
Cool.
I like the mild fishy flaky taste from the fish too. Like I'm that type of person. Like it was real good to me. Like I was
You
real,
like
real
strong
good.
flavors like that. Yeah, it's a cool
Yeah.
technique because everything's cooked, contained together. So you really infuse whatever's in that packet into the food. Go ahead, Christina.
I liked it. I did multiple pouches. The lemon was very powerful though, so I think next time I'm going to cut the lemon down.
The
But
lemon, yeah. Because one of the things with that is because it's got the rind on there. It's not just like like a supreme, it's got the zest on there, and that really does. That once you start steaming that, that really permeates into the food for sure. So, but that's good though. Make some notes about some adjustments to make. We do the technique as it is to demonstrate technique. But those kind of flavor things, obviously can switch up if you ever want to switch it around again. I like it because I like things like that. And I said in a few people's feedback, it's like making pasta. I just like that hands-on kind of construction, some of that old chef stuff. Like I just kind of like building that. And I'll show some pictures here in a second, but if you struggled with the folds and the heart shapes and all that stuff, and I try to make sure to say it in people's feedback as well, it's like it's just one of those things to practice. It's a physical crafting of something. It's not really knowledge that's going to help you when you're going to make those packets. It's going to be muscle memory and how you did it last time and trial and error and all that stuff. So if your packets didn't come out perfect, excuse me, if packets didn't come out perfect, that's just a process of learning. That's not anything to judge, like if you know what you're doing. Like we all don't know what we're doing the very first time we do something, and this is probably the first time for a lot of us. So hopefully it was eye opener. It's definitely old school technique. It's a really cool technique. I talked about it in a lot of people's feedback about how this is, and we talked last week how it's a lot of upfront prep. So if you do this for a group of people, it's a lot of work to get it ready. But the good part about it is it's a very quick pickup. Like when they order it, you put it in the oven and then 8 minutes later, it's ready to go. And that's a benefit too. So it is something to think about if you ever want to impress your guests and want to have something relatively easy that you can prep ahead of time and take the heat off of yourself when it's time for service. So cool. Potato dish. Very good job. They all did great this week. That's very easy, right? You can obviously adjust the flavors on that. But I saw some great work. You guys really did awesome with that. So that kind of wrapped up our ocean sustainability kind of conversation that we're having. We're moving into food waste this week, and our assignment kind of reflects that. But let me just show y'all kind of what your classmates were up to. I think that's helpful because we don't work with each other in a culinary school, ground school environment. Everybody's working together. You can look over everybody's shoulder and kind of see what's going on. We kind of miss that, when we're online. So I always like to show just some pictures. And again, this isn't the contest winners by any means. This is just some photos of some of the work. So a lot of y'all chose to plate the food after the fact, which is a good idea. It's not, this food is not hard to plate, but it's designed to be served table side. So the packets are opened in front of the guests. The steam comes out. Oh my, it's so pretty. And the front of the house staff is the ones doing this. And they might just lay things on the plate in this same kind of style where it's just presented. Here's this, here's this, here's this. And that's completely fine. It's different than constructing a plate back in the kitchen and then sending it out because it's already been taken to the table. But you guys did amazing with this. Saw some great potato dishes. The idea of this stock braising the bottom layer where we can see that reduction happening. That's all that stock is concentrating flavor. It's infusing flavor with your onions. We brought to the table here this knife work, which is the different way to slice the onion, just the lyonnaise. It's basically just going this way with the onion instead of cross cut like a salad cut. It's just something to kind of experiment with. It's the closest way you can get to like julienne an onion. It's onions are tricky because of all the layers and things. Some great packet construction. Again, some wonderful plating. A lot of you did really well with the packets. I said in this feedback, there's two functions. One is the aesthetic look and the presentation, but it's also the functionality of it. And so when you get the first one down and you build them correctly, they work correctly. And so a lot of y'all did wonderful with that. But you can also have a functional packet, even if it doesn't look exactly how it's supposed to. As long as that steam gets contained and we have all this moisture down in the bottom, we can see that. But this student showed the packets actually puffed up, and that's the goal. With these creases right here, that's what's keeping that steam in here, and that's pressure. And so that's where if you opened your packet and there wasn't much moisture left there, that steam just found a way out, and it's going to try its best to do that. So that's why we try to cinch those shut. Another example, some great presentations here. And again, you can prep these all ahead of time, have them all lined up on sheet trays and just fire them to order, and then set a little timer and call it a day. And the cooking blind part, I saw in a lot of narratives, it's kind of tricky. You have to kind of trust the process of that, and it is cooking blind, so it is a little trial and error. Sometimes if you have a larger fillet, it can take a while, or if you have thicker cut vegetables. But anyways, wonderful job. You guys did great. This student, who is in live session right now, I believe, did a presentation here. And I encourage you in this, I put this one last because I wanted to say a note, and I've said it before. You guys make sure to get a Instagram together with all your awesome food. I'm a chef_deal at Instagram if you guys want to find me. I try to put some things on here, but I always like to see what y'all do. But it's a great resource. And then when you present your food, and then especially something like this where you can, share that, because that's valuable. You can share with employers and potential clients. Who knows how you can, make that benefit you. All right. So week 5, fantastic. Everybody give yourself a round of applause. Anything else for week 5 before we move into our assignment for 6? Cool. All right. Well done, everybody. Great job. So this week we are talking about food waste, which is a major part of our jobs. It's definitely one of the standards that you will be held to, if not by your boss, it will be something that you have to hold yourself to if you're the owner yourself or the operator. That the food waste is something that limits how much money you can make, and then we go back to being a sustainable business, right? And plus, it's just the right thing to do. I think a lot of us, the experience we have with food waste is our parents maybe yelling at us, "Don't waste your food. What's your eyes bigger than your stomach," right? Or something like that. But for us as professional chefs, it is basically, our food cost, our food waste tracking, all of those things. That's what makes us professional. We can cook great food, but if we can't, limit food waste and be in charge of those things, we're not going to be cooking for many people for very long. So anyway, all right. So let's talk about our assignments this week. We go to our recipe book. All right, and boom. Okay. Looking at this, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to make so much stuff this week. But listen, the brown butter and gremolata are just gimmies. It's very easy and very quick. So there's really not much going on. Your Mornay sauce is going to be a component in your cauliflower gratin. So brown butter, gremolata, and Mornay, while yes, they will be mise en place photos and some kind of a little bit of a headache in that sense, they're very simple and straightforward things. And I believe you guys have experience with a bechamel already at this point, right? Yeah. Okay. Jason said, yeah. So bechamel sauce or Mornay sauce is simply a bechamel with the addition of cheese. Okay. So any cheese that you can think of, that's all the types of Mornay sauce you can make, right? I used to do a blue cheese Mornay sauce with fresh fried potato chips like nachos. And I'm telling you, I couldn't keep it in-house. That was a super popular entree or appetizer if you ever want to try it. All right, so this is what we're doing: brown butter, gremolata, a cauliflower steak, and a cauliflower gratin. The reason we're doing these things on the food waste week is because what you're going to do is buy a couple heads of cauliflower. You're going to cut your steaks out of the center of that, and then you're going to cook those. That's going to go with, you're going to cook it in your brown butter with gremolata on top. It's just designed to be its own little meal. And then, because we cut the steaks out of the center, we've got the other sides of the cauliflower. We're going to utilize those to make the gratin. Okay. And so the idea is we're utilizing a whole product to make a couple different dishes with the addition of a few little mise en place items, so gremolata, brown butter, bechamel. And it's just a way to kind of showcase how you can take, let's say you had an excess case of cauliflower, right? And you need to use that before it goes bad. We could cut a bunch of steaks, and that's great. But then now we have the extra, which is the florets that are left over. What are we going to do with those? And so that's the mentality, the kind of thinking that's going into this week's assignment. All right. So the very first thing we're making is brown butter. And so I say first, if I were to do these assignments all in one day, I would do it in this order. I'd probably do my brown butter and gremolata first. Then I would cut my steaks and assemble my mise en place for both of these, this cauliflower steak and the gratin. I would then cook the cauliflower steak, and then I would make my Mornay and finish out my gratin. You can do it on 2 separate days if you would like, and that's not the correct way to do it. That's just, when I look at this, that's kind of how I would put it together. It's a decent amount of cooking. Give yourself some time. If you're going to do it all in one day, I would probably do it, try to do it at the end of this week or over the weekend or something. But it's nothing, when we see all these items, don't panic. Brown butter is very easy. You're just going to do a half a pound of butter. If you'd like to do a larger batch, you certainly can. If you'd like to do a smaller batch, you certainly can as well. Half a pound is 2 sticks of butter. So we're not really making a bunch, but have a heat-proof strainer. You can use a chinois strainer. You can use your regular strainer with a little cheesecloth lined in it. It'll make more sense here in a minute, but just kind of have that ready to go. And then in a small saucepan or a saute pan, low to medium heat. We just want enough heat to melt this butter. And what we're doing is, you guys made clarified butter before, right? In classes, I believe. Didn't you have that earlier where you melted the butter and then you kind of skimmed it? Okay, we're doing that same kind of process, but we're not going to skim this. What's going to happen is, as we start to cook this butter, it starts to foam, and then we're just stirring that. And what's going to happen is the milk solids are going to separate, right? And that's what happens when we clarify butter. We have the fat and the milk solids, and then we skim the milk solid off to have the clarified butter. Well, we're going to leave all that together. And as we cook that, the milk solids are going to kind of settle on the bottom of the pan. They're going to start to toast, and that flavor is going to get into the butter. It's going to actually infuse into the fat. And so that's the goal. And then we're going to strain those off and we're going to have a nice, basically brown clarified butter that's got that toastiness from the milk solids. Okay. And there's a lot of flavor there. You can bake with brown butter. You can make like a batch of cookies. Chocolate chip cookies with brown butter is absolutely fantastic. But it is a nice little condiment, I guess you want to say, or a piece of mise en place to have around. But basically, we're just going to cook this until it starts to foam. Chef Luke is the one man in the helm on the video. And we basically, it's very simple. See, we just get our medium heat going. See, we just have a little action in the pan. Doesn't need to be ripping hot. It doesn't need to be like so hot when we put the butter in, we start to immediately turn brown. We just need to start melting that. And then we just control that heat. The chef's got a gas stove, which he's fortunate enough to have. You can do this on electric though. Just crank it up a little bit and start to see some action here. And slowly you'll start to see the browning start to happen. All right. So as we go through, here we go. See, the milk solids are toasting and they're also kind of sinking to the bottom of the pan. That's normal and fine. You can totally, that's to be expected, right? Because that's where the contact from the heat happens that then toasts those, that tints the butter. All right, and then chef's got a little strainer here and that's perfectly sufficient. If there's a little bit of specks in your butter when you're done, it's not the end of the world. And then we're just straining that through and we see that nice brown color that chef's got there. Now, can you go a little further with it if you want? Sure. But that's really it. Okay. So when you're looking at all the recipes, that's the brown butter, right? And the video is 3 minutes long. And I'm pretty sure that's about real time. You know what I mean? It doesn't take that much time to knock that out. Does anybody have any questions about our brown butter? Let me open the chat here just in case. All right. Everybody feeling good about that one? Pretty straightforward, right? Okay. Next, we're going to make a gremolata. This is just a combination of finely minced ingredients. Okay, so you see over here, basically the method is almost in the description. All right, 3 tablespoons of lemon zest, or 3 teaspoons rather. 3 tablespoons of fresh parsley. Doesn't matter if it's flat leaf or curly. I always in a restaurant just use flat leaf parsley. I just like it better. I think it's a little cleaner when you get cases of it. Curly parsley can tend to trap a bunch of sand and dirt in it. So I just like flat leaf, but it doesn't matter what kind of parsley you use. And then a teaspoon of garlic pasted. That's the technique where we're going to take fresh garlic and put it on our cutting board and just kind of rub our knife over the top of it. We really want to get that as finely minced and pasted down as possible. Now let's see in the video. Oops, I want to open this up because I don't want that to keep happening. Hold on. There we go.
Jeff, can we just buy garlic paste?
You can, but I mean, that you can make it and it tastes better to do it with fresh garlic. I mean, you could buy a pre-made gremolata if you want, but that doesn't mean you should do it. No, I'm joking around with you, Renoir. If you can't find fresh garlic, you certainly can use a pasted garlic, but you will get a pack of flavor when you do it yourself.
Okay, I got them both. Like I got them both. You know how they
I got you. Yeah, I mean, it's a cool technique to use, or just to kind of practice where you get it. Finely mincing garlic, it can get sticky and get a little kind of it just sticks to your knife and everything. This is where we're going to put our knife down, and that's why I wanted to see the video. And I wasn't making fun of you, Renoir. I was just joking around. But that's yes, you can if we run into a problem finding fresh. But see what chef's doing here. Okay, let me back it up. So we get our garlic as minced as possible, right? We get our little claw hand stuff, but you could chop your knife over like this, but we're not really looking for chunks because what this is going to be a condiment that this is going to go on a product raw, that garlic. And you don't want to bite into even a small chunk of garlic. If you bite into it, can really, overpower everything. Chef puts a little bit of salt in this just to give it a little bit of grit while he's doing this. And then he's using the back of his knife. Be very careful when you're doing this. The chef kind of shows you what he's doing. And we're just going to kind of scrape that along the cutting board. And that's really going to finish the job with that. Okay. And so that's when we talk about a pasted garlic, that's what you're looking at. And if you're going to use garlic in sauces and things, if you can do it like this, that's definitely going to help out. But the reason we're doing it in this case is because it's actually going to be served raw, and raw garlic is powerful, we don't want to take a bite of that. But basically then we're going to mince everything up and combine it together. So chef shows, so that, the garlic is kind of half the battle on this one. Get a very fine mince on your parsley. And then combine your zested lemon. Now, a chef's got a microplane. If you don't have that available, you can just peel a lemon with a peeler and get those like, small little shavings of that and then dice those up with your knife. But the whole point is once we're finished, we just want to have basically like a, lack of a better word, oops, where are we at here? No, there we go. We just want basically like a sprinkly condiment. Gremolata is it's a powerful condiment. You don't need much of it, but it really works well with the lemon and the garlic and the parsley. Those flavors just work together. And it also cuts through fattier sauces, things like braises. You'll see a veal ossobuco is a classic dish that'll have gremolata served with the marrow, like the bone sticks up and the marrow's in there, a little marrow fork with gremolata. It just cuts through fattier foods like that. And because we're cooking the cauliflower steak in the brown butter, that's just why we're kind of doing that. But really that garlic is, I would say, the critical, maybe pain point of this, but we're just combining minced ingredients. Do y'all have any questions for that? Cool. All right. The original recipe has anchovies in it, or another recipe has anchovies in it, if you want to give it a try. But it was met with some resistance from students to have the anchovies in there, believe it or not. Anyway, no, I worked with a chef that used anchovies just like salt, which was pretty cool. Caesar dressing has the anchovies, but it's not really forward. Like you don't taste Caesar dressing and go like, oh, this is fish in here, right? It's just like that kind of back flavor. Anyway, something to explore if you want to. Yes, Eric.
Actually, like anchovies.
I love anchovies. I love them so much. My wife will never buy them because she hates seafood. And I don't know if you can get more seafoody smelling than anchovies. But anyway, yes. So that's our gremolata. All right. So for our cauliflower steak, this is going to be kind of a center of the plate substitution, another vegetarian option. You guys did the black bean burger. Now we're going to do this one. This is a nice one to break out if you need to switch out a protein. Say you're having a banquet and there's 3 vegetarian guests, but the dish is, steak, potatoes, and green beans. You can switch this out with the chicken breast and it makes a nice, vegetarian option. But the cut is really the main event here. Basically, we're just going to get a head of cauliflower like Chef has. You don't have to trim it too much, but you do want to get the green leaves and things off of it. But look where Chef's starting out. All right. So in this assignment, we're going to cut our steaks out of the center here. And then we're going to use this part for our gratin. Okay, so that's kind of the logic of this. All right, so Chef's just going to go one clean motion through. You got to have a pretty sharp knife. I find that, and you see those florets kind of fall off instantly. The cauliflower can be kind of brittle, and that's the challenge, is trying to get your knife through it in a way that you can get that steak cut. But when I want to show you the finished result, because it kind of will help make a little more sense. So then we reserve our florets. We're going to use those later. All right, so we've got this nice crisp clean edge here. See how the degree of how Chef trimmed this out. We want that stem intact, okay, because that's what's going to hold the florets all together once we make that cut. Here's another angle of it. I find with this, Chef's going right across. Sometimes I'll put the point of my knife on my cutting board if I can, if it's not too tall and weird, to just leverage that down. But Chef's getting right through this. And then we have our steak. I believe the recipe says, where does it say? About 1 inch thick steaks. It's kind of up to you. 1 inch works really well when you just go to cook it. It just holds up well. But if you go thinner than that, it's okay. You run the risk of it breaking. If you go thinner, you can go thicker as well. But this is the ideal. You'll probably get about 2 out of each head of cauliflower, ideally. If you don't, or even if something happens and a couple of florets break off, it's not the end of the world. But that's what we're going for here. This stem completely intact here, and then the florets coming off the edge. And really, a lot of us will trim the little triangle out of those things and stuff. It's not really necessary. You can actually just cook and eat that center part, because if you do that, you might release some of your florets off of there. So that's the cut. Any questions on that at the process at this point? Because that's really the critical part where we get our steak. Now, listen, if something happens and it breaks in half, it's okay. Just cook the 2 halves and proceed and take your photos, and we'll chat about it in your feedback. It's not the end of the world. But that's the style here. So we have our The chef explained a little bit. I guess he does trim a little bit of that. I would leave it there, but there we go. All right, so that's going to go in our gratin as well. I guess we would say this is our finished product. I would still leave that on there. All right, so that's it. Then from here, we're basically going to treat it like a protein. In this case, we're going to cook it with our brown butter that we already have completed. But just get a skillet together. We're going to add our brown butter, and then we're going to lay in there and just sear it and cook it completely on the stovetop. Could you do week 3's basting technique here? Yes, absolutely. That would be fantastic, right? You could put this on the grill. You can. I've seen cauliflower breaded and deep fried like this. There's a lot of ways to cook it. We're just going to sear it and cook it on top of the stove with our brown butter, but we're going to flip it and then we're going to season it once it's done. And then that's it. And that's going to be it. And now the degree of doneness, once you get a browning on both sides, you can put a fork in there or maybe like a little skewer if you want to really test the tenderness of it. But by the time you get that color, you should be pretty much well cooked. And that's where the kind of 1 inch comes into play there. All right. So that's our cauliflower steak. Does anybody have questions on that whole process? Feeling good about that? Wonderful. All right. Well, if you think of something, we also have the second live session. All right. The next one I would make would be our Mornay sauce. And like I said, this is basically just our bechamel. Okay. So we've got 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of AP flour. Any flour will be fine. A quart of whole milk. Could you use a lower fat milk? Yes. You won't really get the results that I think you would want, which would be that nice full sauce. This is going to be a binder in our gratin, and you'll see that a lot in classic French cuisine where this is a mother sauce with the addition of cheese, but a bechamel mother sauce. A mother sauce as an ingredient in a dish. Tomato sauce is another one like that. Demi-glace is another one like that, where it's actually a part of a bigger picture, right? So the idea is that classic French kitchens would have these things on hand made, and they're used as ingredients. And so we're going to make our own here. I'll get messages from students who don't watch the live session that say they can't find Mornay sauce in the grocery store, but you are making it yourself. All right, so basically, and then this Gruyere cheese, this is very similar to a Swiss cheese. You can substitute that out. If you want to just find Swiss cheese, it might be cheaper, that's fine. If you would like to do a different cheese, as long as it's a somewhat firm cheese, that's fine. So,
told her to grab the bag. I hate your dream.
Laverne, I didn't know. Did you? I don't think you had a question. If you did, let me know. You came unmuted there for a second. All right. So then basically we have our cheese, which we can sub out, a little bit of kosher salt, a little bit of white pepper. White pepper is so that we can preserve the color. If you want to use black pepper, it's fine. Just know that you're going to have black specks, obviously, in your sauce, but it's really of no consequence as far as the technique. Melt the butter. We're going to basically make a roux, but we're not going to the week 4 dark chocolate brown. We're just going to get a little color on that. We're going to basically make our bechamel, which you guys are familiar with, and then we're going to fold in the cheese. So chef makes our roux. There we go. And we're basically, you guys have done this before. We're not really looking for much color on that. We're going to need that thickening power of this as opposed to that dark chocolate roux. Then, let's see. Oops, did I miss it? Okay, so we slowly add our milk. It won't be thick right away. Remember, you have to activate the roux with heat, right? So once you mix it up, bring it up to a simmer, and then I would just turn it off and fold in my cheese at this point. You can continue to do it on the heat, but I would just kind of fold that in. And you're basically going to end up with a very thick finished cheese sauce here. And from here, like that's the secret to mac and cheese, right? If you use cheddar cheese, like making something like this, a Mornay sauce, that's the good stuff right there. Very versatile sauce. But in this case, this is finished. All right. And your recipe, walks us through that. Remove from the pan from the heat, transfer to a container to cool. We'll go over the photos here in a minute, but I believe one of the photos is your nappe consistency. I just want to see this sauce production. And then we have that to now construct our gratin. Any questions on our Mornay sauce? You guys are old pros when it comes to mother sauces, right? We don't have to talk too much about it. But anyways, if y'all think of questions, please let me know. All right, go ahead.
I think I've actually kind of used that type of sauce, not like the Mornay sauce, but I've kind of used that technique for like nacho cheese, mac and cheese,
Oh, yeah.
that type of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mornay is just the fancy name for it, right? For sure.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. That's the culinary school version. Christina.
I was just going to say the same thing. I use that very technique with different type of cheese with this really good chicken dish. My husband loves it every time I make it.
Right. Yeah. So it's basically, bechamel is almost like a white gravy, right? And so you can use this in all sorts of, savory dishes for sure. Things like you could make versions of like pot pie and, baked casseroles and things like that with this. On that note, and that's a good kind of way to lead in, it's okay if it's rather thick. You don't need it to be sauce text, almost like sauce as if you were going over the top of something. If I was doing that, I would probably thin it out just a touch with maybe a little heavy cream or something like that. But that's yeah, that's definitely it's a component to bind everything together in our next dish. All right, so that's our Mornay sauce, and then go back to our gratin. All right, so now we have our florets separated already. We did that when we cut our steak, so we have about a pound of these. All right, a little bit of fresh lemon juice, your bechamel or Mornay sauce. In this case, let's use our Mornay sauce. I guess if you wanted to make another bechamel without the cheese in it, you could, but you already have one. Dry breadcrumbs. This can be panko, Italian, however you would like. They could be seasoned or unseasoned. We're just going to put these on the top to kind of brown and crisp up the top. So you can use any type of breadcrumb that you'd like. Parmesan cheese, you can sub that out. I would go with a firm cheese though. If you have something, pecorino, something that you can grate that's kind of hard. I would do it fresh. If you have the option to do that, buy a chunk of cheese and do it yourself. As opposed to the powdered stuff. But, worst case, if we had to use that, we could. And then a little bit of butter. Basically, we're going to get our oven ready, place the cauliflower and the lemon juice in boiling salted water. And we're just going to basically blanch and par cook these. So it kind of depends on the amount of, or the size of your florets, but we're not going to go just raw into the oven. We want to blanch and have these kind of par cooked and ready to go. So we get them a little bit soft. And then we're going to butter the bottom of a baking pan or hotel pan. You could do this in a cast iron skillet, anything that's oven safe. Okay, so basically, chef's got a loaf pan that he's using here. All right, so we're going to blanch our florets first. Let's let this get unfuzzy. There we go. A little bit of lemon juice in there. Acidic cooking liquids will help white food stay white. And that's why that's in there. You can also mix a little bit of flour in that water and create what's called a blanc. And that will also help preserve the white. If you do things like celery root, cauliflower, salsify, some other kind of white vegetables, turnips, things like that, a little bit of acid will help retain that white color. Then just blanching, it doesn't have to be a rip and boil, but we're just going to get them a little bit tender. They don't need to be mushy, but they are going to cook, obviously. But one of the key things with this, and a chef doesn't show in the video, is that when you strain that, think of it like when you made your mashed potatoes or your potato puree, that we want some of that moisture out. We want it as dry as possible, right? So strain it, let it sit for a little bit, let it steam a little bit to just kind of get some of that excess moisture out. Because even if we don't do that, we kind of run the risk of that moisture coming out in the gratin, and then it can be kind of soupy, and we don't want that. We want a nice solid, we want to bind it together with sauce, not water, if that makes sense. So strain that off and let it steam a little bit, but then we're just going to transfer it to our pan. And then we're just going to construct this thing. On the recipe, it basically just says butter the bottom of your pan, whatever you're deciding to cook in, cover it with your sauce. You don't really have to really manhandle it much. You just you want those whole pieces of cauliflower in there. If you have a ton of sauce, this calls for 6 ounces, and I believe the Mornay sauce yielded a quart. We don't need to put that whole quart on top of there, just enough to bind it together. I've seen it, I will see it in assignments as they come in, where there's a lot of sauce in there. I like it better when I can see the florets of cauliflower and I kind of know what's underneath the surface, right? It doesn't look like a casserole really with what is that? What's underneath the surface of that? It's bound together so we can kind of see that. So just 6 ounces of that bechamel. Cover with bechamel, or Mornay sauce rather, and then mix together your breadcrumbs and cheese and then sprinkle that over. So separately mix your cheese and your breadcrumbs together. If you want to add some fresh herbs in there, you want to put a little extra seasoning of some other spice that's of no consequence to your grade. That's just a flavor component, but this is, the recipe is just the cheese and breadcrumbs. And then you're going to bake it for about 20 minutes to heat it through and to get a little browning on the top. If you get that in the oven, that's great. This says under the broiler or salamander. That salamander is the fire that's super hot in restaurants, and you slide things underneath there. You can do it in your broil setting of your oven. Just be careful because it happens relatively quickly. That can, burn the top of that. But at the end of the process, we want to see something like this. All right, just a little browning on the top. Nothing too crazy. You can see in this version, Chef, we can see those cauliflower florets still there. Now at this point, you're ready to go. You could get that, start serving it, and it's a very good dish. It's very good. It's a great way to trick your children to eat cauliflower. I think a lot of us have a bad relationship with cauliflower. We all, it's usually the vegetable that's left over on the veggie tray that nobody likes to eat, right? But this is a great way to do that. If you have a keto diet guests or want to advertise that, cauliflower is all over the place for keto diets as a starch. But you can let that rest, and then you could probably get a little, thicker slices out of it. You could actually let it completely cool down and chill this way, and then you could really cut slices out of it, or you could stamp rounds of it if you wanted to serve it that way. There's a few ways to kind of play with the presentation, but that is all of our recipes for the week. So that to say, what do we have for questions? You guys feeling comfortable with this week? It's a lot of prep, a lot of cooking, but it's manageable, I would imagine. There we go. Yeah, pepper gravy. Yep, for sure. The bechamel. Yep, absolutely. Do that with bacon fat. You use bacon grease to make your roux, and then you add the milk to that and throw it in biscuits, and yes, and then call me to come over. Cauliflower mash. You tricked your stepdad into eating healthier. There you go. You did not fool them. Yeah, I don't know. This is a good dish though. I mean, it's basically like mac and cheese with cauliflower instead of pasta. So maybe you can spin it that way. Let's look at our required photos here. Y'all remember in the announcement section, I have all of that information here. And there's even a breakdown of the assignment by our favorite chef, Pietro. But we just did all that. So mise en place, I pinned it up here at the top. It's got some juicy tidbits for the week. A little walkthrough of the week. Food waste lecture. Here's our photos. All right, so for the brown butter, use any type of butter you'd like. Our self-ID sanitation, we always have that. I think I've tried to blow this up, but it doesn't really work, does it? Maybe a little bit. All right, your mise en place for this is very easy. Butter in a pan. And then just see your butter finished. That's your melted butter, and then you're removed from the sauce pan. You can put it in something clear. Anyway, you can kind of illustrate the brownness of it. All right, that's basic, straightforward. Gremolata, mise en place is going to be your minced ingredients. There's our anchovies. You can tell this is an old assignment, but just your 3 ingredients here, and then all of your, I'm sorry, the garlic separate, just so I can get a close-up of the garlic, and then everything together, and then that's that. That's the gremolata. For our cauliflower steak, mise en place, you could put your whole head of cauliflower in this mise en place photo if you would like. Then your trimmed pieces that you've cut your steak for another use, and then I just want to see the cauliflower steaks. All right, so basically your florets, your cauliflower steaks, and that's that. Then we cooked this. So we talked about the pan searing. So we'll see it in the pan. And then once it's finished, you just can garnish that however you'd like. So it's basically your steaks cut, mise en place, steaks cut, florets reserved, cooking in the pan, and finished plating. That's our steak. Then for the our gratin, our mise en place for this student added some ham to that. You certainly can do that. Simmering cauliflower, just want to see that blanching, see that drained, and then see your dish ready to go. Your bechamel and everything combined together in your pan before you bake it, and then after you bake it, just like your granola. All right, so I just want to see it before it goes in, and then once it's finished, I just want to see that as well. And your narrative is required. And any questions on photos? I encourage you to plate everything. If you buy the garlic paste, show a picture of that. Yeah, just show me what you're working with. It helps me just to kind of see everything. But you should do it yourself. All right. I'll get off the soapbox. All right. Any questions, y'all? If not, we'll break and we'll come back and chat about food waste. Cool. All right, everybody. Happy cooking. I'll see y'all in a few hours. Process. And if you have any questions about this, we'll bring it back and we'll start off our second session with any questions for this week. Cool. All right, y'all. See you in a bit. Bye.